Hello and welcome to another episode of FortiGuard Live. I'm Derek Manky, and joined with me today is Glenn Maiden, coming all the way from Australia. How are you doing, Glenn?
G'day, Derek. It's great to be here. It's good to have got to the boss level of the FortiGuard Labs game.
Yeah, it's every day is a boss day. I mean, we have to be on the game, right? And making executive decisions and following cybercrime and really trying to make an impact on that. And it's that time of year again, right? It's a cybersecurity awareness month. That's one of my favorite months because we always try to educate, and we always say that everybody has a role in the fight of cybercrime. So I wanted to talk about that with you today, Glenn. In our first half 2021 threat landscape report, there was some bad news, of course, that we have to be aware of, but some good news, right? And some of that good news we'll talk about today, and it's I think being driven by more harmony in the industry, more partnerships between private sector, private to public sector, everything from the good work we've built up by experience from the Cyber Threat Alliance to Interpol and the World Economic Forum. So I'd like to talk about some of those relevant notes there. But being in Australia, there's also cybercrime has no borders, and there's also regional partnerships and things that are happening too. And I just wanted to get your insights as to some of the happenings and values of those in Australia.
Yeah, no, thank you, Derek. I mean, it's funny. We're obviously so involved with threat intelligence, but it's so important to have that context. We need to know sort of some of the intricacies of the local environment, some of the constraints and the technical debt that we're trying to protect sort of locally. Local regulations and legislations even we need to take into account. The local skill sets, the maturity, all those sort of things make an impact on how we face that cyber threat together. And I'm sort of lucky enough in my experience to have looked at this problem from many angles from a partnership perspective. So I've spent sort of 15 years in defence. I was the security advisor for our tax office. I've worked for a big system integrator. I've now worked for a vendor. And every single one of these different sort of views of the problem brings a different perspective. And the partnerships where we work together, that's when we can sort of, really get those economies of scale and try and sort of bring our strengths and overcome our weaknesses by facing this together. So, the threat part is the easy part. The harder part is making sure that we can transfer the knowledge and the context and the skill transfer and really, really looking at those specific threats and overcoming them.
Yeah, and part of this, I think, is about the commitment and skin in the game, as we like to say. In my experience, there's always been a lot of goodwill because we, quite frankly, need to team up to fight cybercrime. It's just such a monumental challenge. And there's a lot of smart people on the good side. But are you seeing also regionally in Australia more of that skin in the game, more of the commitment and actual projects happening underway?
100%, 100%. I think we're all recognising just how important that is. So, I mean, in my time with FortiGuard Labs, which is sort of about a year and a half now, I've been sharing threats and intelligence and perspectives with our telecommunications, our major telcos, our service providers, our universities, and our Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which is our sort of capstone organisation. Yep. But more and more, I'm seeing all these organisations reaching out. Any legislation that's coming out there sort of coming and saying, Fortinet, what do you think? Is this good? Is this bad? What from an industry perspective? But there is a real push to try and sort of, bring that divide from, I'm just a federal government department, or I'm just a customer and I'm going to do what I want, or I'm, some other entity. It really is becoming much more of a team sport.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great to hear. Obviously, over there in Australia, we're seeing the same thing in the U.S. as an example, basically in every major region that we're looking at, because we're seeing these one-on-one relationships, which are equally as important. Looking at specific verticals, there's a lot of vertical-specific, geo-specific threat activity. Of course, things like we've highlighted out specific problems to tackle in those regions. And that's very important, right? And I am seeing a similar thing being built up. But then zooming out, right? If we look at the bigger picture globally, there's also a lot of these global efforts that are happening. So Cyber Threat Alliance, of course, founded back in, we co-founded that back in May 2014. That's the private to private sector largely. It started with the security vendors. Now there's over 30 members within the CTA. Again, this is that theme that we talked about in the report, is that everybody has their role. In the case of the CTA, it's sharing good threat intelligence to make it actionable, to raise the bar on mitigation and protection, right? To make it more expensive for cybercriminals to operate, to make it more of a pain in their side, right? And that's one way to disrupt them. But there's other efforts, and I know you've been involved with the World Economic Forum. We can talk about this. Law enforcement and Interpol is also very important as well when it comes to trying to, that's a hat that we wear when it comes to trying to find out who the bad guys are and how we actually fight cybercrime that way.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most valuable parts of our jobs in actually getting out there and speaking to people like law enforcement, speaking to the national certs, speaking to the people that are working in the cyber operations centres, and finding out what they're facing day to day. And I know I'm very, very proud to be working on behalf of FortiGuardLIVE with the World Economic Forum in an effort to try and do something sort of, as you say, private to private, working with public sector and a whole bunch of other stakeholders, trying to really make a dent in the cybercrime. And I think we can if we bring all our various skill sets together. We've got experts in pockets, so actually world-leading experts in pockets in not only in just FortiGuardLIVE, but in some of our threat-sharing partners. It's extremely powerful when we work together and bring our shared expertise to face sort of cyber criminal ecosystem, the threat of that.
Yeah, this is something we highlighted in the report. This is the good news, so it's great to be able to talk to you about good news. But one of the things we highlighted in the report, obviously, there's a runaway ransomware threat, right? And we've seen over a tenfold increase in ransomware alone, as an example, in the first half of 2021. So we know that there's a problem, but there is some good news in terms of if we look at the amount of activity, like I'm talking about disrupting and fighting back. There's been measurable progress here, certainly compared to a year ago. If you look at what happened with I'm talking about, so you mentioned the national cert piece. I think that's important on the disruption of infrastructure, working together with law enforcement to take down infrastructure. Emotet, TrickBot, those were two ones that were taken offline. Since we highlighted this in the report, since Emotet was taken offline, it never came back fully. It went to about half strength. Right, and it's been sitting at that a new watermark essentially for its activity. TrickBot went offline, but it came back, but it's not nearly as prolific as before. And clearly, to me, it's a result of all this great strategic coordination. I think the coordination is very important, right? But that's happening between the various stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, with the Emotet that you mentioned, I mean, that was sort of in January, and basically, I think at the best part, it was almost a 75% reduction in activity of that particular botnet. But yeah, it's important. I think we do focus. I mean, those ransomware, the 10 times ransomware statistics are absolutely frightening. But I think we do sometimes tend to under promote and under sort of celebrate our successes because we are doing some really, really good stuff. And even the threats that we're sort of facing every single day with whether it's doing our threat analysis or sharing information with some of our partners. One of the biggest successes I think for FortiGuardLIVE down in this region in the last 12 months was we had a copy paste campaign that was targeting Australian government and industry. Anyway, I was working closely with our ACSC. And they shared a bunch of TTPs, some signatures of some web shells, some bad IPs, bad DNS names. Working with yourself and the back end of FortiGuard, we had all those protections into our Fortinet fabric before that campaign was even announced. So by the time that actually became public and people started to sort of hit the panic button, we were already protected from it. So there is really, really good stuff going on every day. We just probably don't promote it as much as we could.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head here, Glenn. I think so. This is what we call the element of surprise, right? Being able to actually be prepared proactively before, as an example, when it comes to takedown efforts, right? Having all of your ducks in a row, as we like to say, right? Have all of that organized before the effort actually takes place, because that, if it's a takedown effort, you want to catch the cyber criminals by surprise so that they're scrambling and trying to go back to the drawing board, as an example. When it comes to the mitigation, like you just said, having the IOCs, the TTPs, the intelligence in trust. That's another thing about these relationships. They require trust in the partnership. That takes time to build. That's been building for a long time with the Cyber Threat Alliance, as an example. in the CTA, there's an early share program, right? There's been over 250 early shares that have been done, and that's members that are sharing intelligence before they go live public with a blog, as an example. Why? Because it helps to build that security layer and security stack up, right? Because as soon as you expose and release information on cyber criminals, the cat's out of the bag, and they're going to try to shift tactics. So I think that's why, like, the coordination, like early sharing and trust and coordination, is just paramount to these efforts.
Yeah, and we have actually got a couple of strategic advantages, I guess, even in the time zone where it's sort of, I guess it's sort of late in the day for you and early for me. I mean, if we see something or you see something, it does give sort of those different geos a little bit of a head start to prepare some mitigations. And I know that certainly was the case a couple of years ago with WannaCry, when that sort of hit your end of the earth first, and by the time it sort of got here, there was already some work done in mitigation. So again, the power of setting up those relationships beforehand, so we communicate proactively and early, makes one heck of a difference.
Yeah, and that's a so in terms of being on the front lines and response, right? So breaking threat response, we do that with our FortiGuard outbreaks as an example. That is a great example of the geos and how we need to work together, not only with ourselves but the partners. In some cases, it's literally getting on a phone. We like to call it the bat phone, but literally getting on a phone to talk to some of the smartest people in the world in this space, right? To be able to compare notes, to clear the fog, as we say, debunk myths that might be out there in media, as an example, and really to confirm the facts. And that's another. So the vetting and verification process is really important as well. And I think so going back to the coordination piece, I want to talk about the World Economic Forum, the WEF effort. So we're a founding member of the C4C, the Center for Cybersecurity, and I know you've been heavily involved with the PAC, the Partnership Against Cybercrime. There's about 40 members in there, and this is a really important initiative, I think, a partnership, because it's all the things we talked about: law enforcement, Cyber Threat Alliance, the banks and telcos, and like the private sector, SOCs, right? And the certs also. They're all part of this. So it's a very diverse ecosystem with both private and public sector stakeholders. So it's kind of putting everything together under one hood. And I know there's some efforts underway already. Maybe we can talk about that at a high level, what the plan is there. And it's really, I think a good way to describe it is it's trying to act as a foundation, if you will, or a vehicle to be able to drive better coordination, more of the building more of the trust between all those stakeholders, all the things we just talked about, right?
Yeah, what I like about it so much, I mean, if you think of all these different organisations, so if we're working with an intelligence organisation, they might have a classified source, or a law enforcement organisation might have some sensitivities around a source, and we are working with our competitors. So these are people that we compete against in the market, but all these different organisations with different priorities and different drivers, we're all working together, to try and combat that cybercrime, entity. In collaboration and in sort of good faith partnership, and it's working. It's really, really positive. In the case of the World Economic Forum partnership, we're working with some of the biggest names in the world to build up a picture of what the cyber criminal ecosystem looks like. So if you imagine there's bits and pieces of intelligence and information sort of scattered all over the place, but just imagine if we could actually pull that information together, we could standardize it, and we could have that in sort of as one single source of truth. Imagine then, when we look at it, we can sort of find some linkages. We can find, is there something similar between one cyber criminal organisation to the other? Yeah, are they using shared infrastructure? Is there one person maybe that's facilitating one element of the ecosystem? So that's the sort of things that we're looking at, and we're making some really, really good progress there. And it's something I don't think. I mean, obviously, we've been sharing and partnering with people for a long time, but that level of maturity now is getting really, really high. It's very, very pleasing.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is that it's not starting from scratch, right? Some of these other efforts we talked about, Cyber Threat Alliance as an example, Interpol, they're also getting involved in this. So it's really been building off that experience, which is really exciting, and putting this under, like I said, one hood. And it's really, I think, important also from like we talked about the coordination piece of it too, but like you said, having that where we can actually look at a map of cybercrime, right? So things like how many ransomware gangs are out there, how many different money laundering networks, how many people are in these organizations. There's a lot of question marks out there. But the better that it's like threat illumination, right? I use that word sometimes. The more we light that up and have a look at it, then we have a clearer picture. Then we have a more strategic way that we can actually try to disrupt their supply chain and really try to hit them where it hurts, right?
Yeah, and one of the most exciting things for me, I mean, I'm so lucky working in FortiGuardLIVE with you and the team. I mean, we've got some of the best threat intelligence people on the planet working in our team. It's every single day is exciting. But you imagine when we partner with other organisations, we're working with our same people in all these other organisations and building up those sort of economies of scale. So we're sort of connecting with some of the best in the world to really fight, I guess, some of the best in the world criminals. So we really are bringing it to the fore. It is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to bring the best to the table. I agree. I mean, that's one of the most passionate things, as you know, I'm very, very involved with is the industry piece and then the partnerships. I think it's critical. And that's why it's good. I just wanted to call it out as good news from the threat landscape report. Like I said, we're seeing measurable progress. Thanks for your contributions again working with WEF. I know within the partnership, we're going to be able to actually do even better at that, right? To really bring it to scale and force and have good measurable results with this. And that's the way forward. Glenn, I want to thank you for your time again. It's been always a pleasure to chat with you. And it's great to talk to you every day. For more information on what we're doing around Cybersecurity Awareness Month and FortiGuard Labs research, you can check out our threat research blog, blog.fortinet.com. Once again, I'm Derek Manky with FortiGuard Live. Thanks.